In times like these, we all need a word of encouragement. From pastor and best-selling author Max Lucado comes the Max Lucado Encouraging Word podcast. With over 40 years of ministry and more than 145 million books sold in 50 languages, Max shares the greatest story ever told, the living Savior who brings hope for a lifetime. Through rich biblical insight, heartfelt storytelling, you'll be reminded that God is always near, always for you, and always in you. Listen to the Max Lucado Encouraging Word podcast, where hope meets your day. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Each week on Culinary Confidential, Christina Cates, a seasoned foodie who has worked at some of New York City's top restaurants, will share her passion for the culinary world. Whether you're a professional chef, a restaurant enthusiast, or a lover of good food, Christina dives into the heart of hospitality, exploring the trends, triumphs, and challenges facing the food service profession. And you won't want to miss her chats with some of the most interesting and influential industry voices. And now, please take your seat at the table as Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates starts now, exclusively on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates. Tonight, we raise a glass, literally and metaphorically, to a holiday that's beloved around the world, St. Patrick's Day. But we're not just talking about corned beef, green rivers, or parades. We're talking about heritage, craft, and the objects we honor at the table. This show is produced in association with my dear friend, Lucas A. Ferrara. Tonight, we travel spiritually and culturally to Ireland, a land known for its rolling green hills, ancient stone walls, legendary hospitality, and a culinary culture that is humble, soulful, and deeply connected to the land and sea. St. Patrick's Day began as a religious feast honoring Ireland's patron saint, but over centuries, it evolved into a global celebration of Irish identity, from family kitchens to grand dining tables, from small villages to major cities around the world. And tonight, we're exploring Ireland through a lens that doesn't always get the spotlight, but absolutely should: Irish crystal craftsmanship. When people think of Irish craftsmanship, they often think of clothes made of wool and Irish step dancing and singing. But for centuries, Ireland's name has been synonymous with some of the most beautiful cut crystal in the world. But behind that sparkle lies a story of tradition, decline, revival, and transformation. Crystal cutting in Ireland traces back to the 18th century, long before machines and mass production, when communities gathered around furnaces in Waterford, Cork, and beyond to shape molten glass into objects of extraordinary beauty. These were hand-blown and hand-cut pieces, the product of intense skill and patience. By the mid-20th century, one name stood tallest: Waterford Crystal. Officially founded in 1947, this brand revived Ireland's ancient glassmaking traditions and brought them back to international prominence. For decades, Waterford became the global standard for premium crystal, prized for its clarity, its precision cuts, and its ability to capture and refract light in ways that feel almost magical. But like many great traditional industries, Waterford Crystal couldn't escape the pressures of the modern world. After a global financial crisis in 2009, the company went into receivership and its original large factory closed. A new facility opened in Waterford City in 2010, producing around 45,000 pieces a year using traditional methods, mostly for high-end handcrafted lines and for factory tours. At the same time, the brand's ownership shifted. Fiskars Corporation bought Waterford and expanded production into Slovenia, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Germany to keep up with global demand. So today, while authentic handcrafted Waterford crystal is still made in Ireland, much of the volume you see on store shelves worldwide is produced elsewhere. This shift hasn't changed where crystal is made. It has changed how it's made. Traditional crystal, rich in lead content, was once the hallmark of Irish craftsmanship. Today, production balances classic hand techniques with modern efficiencies and sustainable materials, including newer lead-free formulas. And this brings us to my guest tonight, Sean Daly, master crystal cutter and the man behind Dingle Crystal. Dingle is a coastal town in Ireland. Sean began his career in 1973 at just 15 years of age as a young apprentice at Waterford. After 5 years of formal training, he qualified as a crystal cutter and went on to become a master craftsman with the company. He remained there until 1988, when Waterford began offering voluntary packages as part of a move to shift some production overseas. Sean accepted one of the first packages offered and established his own studio outside Waterford City. When Waterford moved much of its production overseas, Sean made a conscious choice to preserve the craft in Ireland. His workshop in the scenic town of Dingle continues to hand-cut crystal the traditional way, keeping alive a skill that in Ireland today is growing rarer by the year. Sean represents generations of Irish artisans who believe that the objects we eat and drink from should carry beauty, history, and intention. The numbers tell the story. Where once thousands of master cutters made crystal across Ireland, today only a handful remain, Sean among them. Each piece he creates carries not just light and reflection, but history and heritage. Crystal is where celebration lives, used for toasts, weddings, holidays, and generational milestones. Sean's designs are influenced by the Dingle Peninsula and traditional Celtic themes, incorporating flowing lines and heritage patterns into contemporary forms. Every piece that leaves the workshop is still personally signed and dated by him. Dingle Crystal does not supply other retail stores. All pieces are hand-cut exclusively in their workshop. It is now one of the last remaining studios in Ireland still producing fully hand-cut crystal on site. The studio has received international recognition, most notably for crafting the Shamrock Bowl, presented to the President of the United States at the White House for St. Patrick's Day from 2022 to 2024. And in 2023, Sean was invited to the White House to witness the presentation of the bowl, a significant milestone for the company. His work has been collected by figures including Bono of U2, and the workshop welcomes over 4,000 visitors annually from the U.S. who come to see traditional Irish crystal cutting in action. So if you've ever admired crystal's sparkle on a holiday table, tonight you'll get to hear what it takes to make it, and why keeping that tradition alive matters just as much as preserving a family recipe or an old song. This is a St. Patrick's Day episode about craft, culture, and connection, how what we place on the table matters just as much as what's on the plate. Sean, welcome to Culinary Confidential. I want to give a special thank you to your son, Adam, who coordinated all of this. I know he's in the business with you, and I'm sure that makes you so proud that you're keeping the authentic tradition alive in the family. Let's start in Dingle.
Thank you, Christina, for inviting me onto your show first. It's a pleasure. It's a first for me and to be on a podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted because of the connection with my product, crystal and wine glasses and whiskey glasses and the culinary world. I'm delighted to be chatting to you in New York and this evening here in Dingle, Ireland. We're on the westernmost part of Ireland in West Kerry. So it's next stop is the United States, they say.
Oh, that's
so thank
funny.
you for inviting me.
Well, the St. Patrick's Day episode is actually one of my favorites because I'm Irish. My grandmother, her sister, well, she wasn't born in Ireland, but all her sisters were born in Ireland. So I grew up with an Irish heavy background. There was Irish step dancing at weddings and family events. So this is special for me. And I have Irish crystal that my parents got me when they visited Ireland. So I'm so excited for this, and I can't thank you enough.
You know, and back in the day when I first started in the industry, and my history goes back to the city of Waterford on the east coast of Ireland. That's where I grew up, in a little village called Kilmeaden. It's very famous for its cheese. They make wonderful cheese and Kilmeaden cheese. But I grew up as a child in the city of Waterford, and the big employer back in the day when I was young was the Waterford Glass Company, and then it became known as the Waterford Crystal Company. And that's where I started my life in the crystal business. They were shipping crystal worldwide, and it was the 1970s in Ireland, early 70s. And at that time, Waterford employed nearly 4,000 people, and that was massive. Today, we have companies in Ireland like Google, Apple, they're all Dell. You know, they all employ thousands of people. But Waterford was the major employer in the city where I grew up. And there was another company there called Bosch and Lomb. They made sunglasses. Everyone in the city had a pair of sunglasses, and they all had crystal at home, but they had very little else.
Oh, that's so funny.
But that was the early 70s, and I applied for an apprenticeship with the Waterford Company. And the reason I applied for apprenticeship was that in my home, at my mum, her brother was a designer with Waterford Crystal. He was a master craftsman, and she had a couple of beautiful ceiling fixtures hanging out of the house, out of the ceiling. And I always admired him. My dad, on the other hand, he was a motor mechanic. He was a diesel mechanic. And I was going to start an apprenticeship with him because I was into motorbikes and But actually, what I discovered was I really enjoyed riding the motorcycles. I was never really a technical person, but I used to go down the pit with my dad and we'd lift in gearboxes into cars, and I discovered that's not for me. So I got an interview with Waterford Crystal, and I was 15 years of age. That was young.
Yeah.
And they brought me into the factory for a day, and I ended up on the wheel, cutting stars on the base of whiskey glasses, and you get all the pints in the centre. And so at the end of the day, they gave me a test to do 6 whiskey glasses with a star on each. And if all the pints were meeting in the centre, they gave me an apprenticeship. So I got my apprenticeship, I passed the test, and I'm still doing it today, over 50 years later.
That's incredible. And people can't see because you and I are doing this virtually, this interview, because you are in Ireland right now. But behind you is some of the most stunning crystal I've ever seen. What do you have back there? You have vases, martini glasses, champagne flutes.
Martinis, beautiful brandy balloons and, whiskey glasses. We do wine goblets. I mean, my journey was where I learned the skills. It took me 5 years to qualify. And if I go back to that and just explain that little process about the crystal. So when I undertook my apprenticeship with Waterford, that was a 5-year journey. And at the end of 5 years, they handed me a bowl to make. And if I passed the bowl, I was then a qualified craftsman. And I made this bowl, which was a beautiful bowl, and I did pass it, and they issued me, I qualified as a craftsman, and they gave me a certificate. So at that stage, after 5 years, and I was just a little over 20 years of age, I could nearly cut every design on bowls, all by hand. And I stayed on with Waterford Crystal. We were shipping crystal all over the world with Waterford. There was 3,000 people working there, and back in the day, like, the company was massive exports worldwide. Now technology started to change coming into the late 80s, and the company had to cut back on the workforce. And it was around that time that I left and went out into business on my own, and I stayed in the industry. And I'm one of the very few people still doing it today. Here in west of Ireland, in Dingle, County Kerry, our company, Dingle Crystal, I have one qualified craftsman working with me, but I have 3 other young craftsmen. Well, some of them are not so young, but they're all apprenticing at the moment and working with us. So there's 5 of us up on the wheels, hand cutting the crystal every day. And today, I'm proud to say, with Dingle Crystal, we ship worldwide. We don't do stores. We don't supply stores as such, but we do ship to people's homes all over the world, mostly North America. People come to Ireland every year from America, from New York, Boston, and they fly into Shannon Airport and come down to Kerry for long weekends and come out to visit us in Dingle. We are just one of other attractions, but we're a manufacturing company, craft company, and so that's where we get our business. We get limousine drivers, and we'd also get bus tours, small bus tours,
That's awesome. I'm dying to go. I hope I can make my way to Dingle someday. Let's talk about Dingle, because honestly, I had never heard of Dingle, Ireland, before researching about you. So this is a fishing town?
Yes. So Dingle is in the far west of Ireland. It's a small fishing town, and the Irish word is called Dangan y Cush. It's Hussey's Folly is something. So it was an old fishing town, and in the 1980s, we had a dolphin came into the harbour, bottlenose dolphin, and he was around for 35 years, and his name was Fungi. And people got to know and come from all across Ireland and even the States, and they'd come to Dingle just to see Fungi the dolphin. But it's also got some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. The movie Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, that was filmed in Dingle. Ryan's Daughter with Robert Mitchum was filmed here in Dingle. Right now, at the moment, there's a French Netflix movie. They're in town for the next 8 weeks, filming some kind of meant to be a rugged island, but it's actually Dingle Town. Star Wars in 2016 came to Dingle. I'm not sure which one, but they had all the beehive buildings. So on the west of Dingle Town, on Slayhead Drive, the scenery is spectacular. And on the edges of all the cliffs going down to the sea are these old beehive buildings. And they look like igloos, but they're made out of stone. And people come from they're like World Heritage, National Heritage sites. But people come to see these places and they come. So Dingle has kind of built up a name for its culinary food. It's got some really nice restaurants. Solace, Doyle's. There's a whole load of restaurants in town that people come to visit. And, over the last 25, 30 years, we've got a great reputation down here. So it's almost a 12-month of the year tourism
That's
town.
amazing. That's great for you guys.
Now, it really kicks off in March, and that will go through right up to next November. Now, we're very lucky in Dingle Crystal, my company, and, we have a company from America on the West Coast in Washington State called Rick Steves Travel. He's got his own TV show, travel show in America. Rick, I'm not sure if you ever heard of him, Christina, but his name is Rick Steves. He brings tours to Ireland, like there's Rick Steves Europe, Rick Steves Italy, Rick Steves France, and Rick Steves Ireland. So he brings tours to Ireland, and they come to Dingle Crystal 4 times a week. And they're small bus tours. There would be maybe 25 people on it. And they come in and we take them into the factory and we show them the process, working with the crystal up close where they can see the men drawing the designs on the pieces, handcrafting the pieces, polishing the pieces. And then once every piece is done, Christina, every piece is then signed underneath by the craftsman. So we sign all our work before we pack it and ship it.
That's incredible. Do you ever give lessons there?
Well, actually, we're doing what's called a masterclass tour this year for the first time. Dingle Crystal, a masterclass tour encapsulates it incorporates bringing people in here where they'll do come out into the factory. We're going to teach them how to cut a glass. We'll have them up on the wheel, and they get to keep their piece of crystal when they're finished cutting it, and they can take it home with them. We'll also do a whiskey tasting with them. We have some nice local whiskies here, and
what are some of the local whiskies? Let's give them a shout out.
We have the Dingle Whiskey Distillery, Christina, which is the whiskey boom started off in Ireland about 12 or 14 years ago, and the Dingle Distillery was one of the very first. Now, we always had Jameson and Middleton and all the other distilleries, but there's a real resurgence of whiskey in Ireland, and I'm sure it's the same in the States. So we have our own distillery here in town called the Dingle Whiskey Distillery, and they make 3 or 4 different styles of whiskies, and people come from around the world to visit them. And and they also come up to see Dingle Crystal. We always try to have a nice whiskey decanter that we make, and we make whiskey glasses.
Yeah. Okay, I should have them on the show next year for the St. Patrick's Day episode.
Absolutely.
Ireland has always valued things made by hand, whether it's soda bread, brown butter, knitwear, or crystal. These traditions weren't born out of luxury, but out of care and longevity. Crystal isn't just something you look at, it's something you hear, you feel, and you experience. When we come back, we'll explore how crystal elevates the dining experience and how tradition and modern tables meet. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate, on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970. The Answer.
Welcome back to the show, celebrating St. Patrick's Day with Irish master craftsman Sean Daly of Dingle Crystal. Sean is one of Ireland's last remaining master crystal cutters, and I feel so lucky to have him on the show with me tonight. Sean, welcome back.
Thank you, Christina.
Okay, before the break, we talked about so many amazing things, but I did have a question that popped into my head when you were talking about the restaurant scene in Dingle. What are some of the traditional Irish meals that are being served at some of these restaurants? What's popular?
Well, I guess you know yourself, like the restaurants scene has changed so much in the last, chefs these days, they are, I'm not saying they're seeking a Michelin star, but everything has to be so right, and people expect that, especially young people in their 30s going out for a meal. So, yeah, bacon and cabbage is still very popular, but it'd be more of the early evening food like that you get in a bar in Dingle. If you go into a pub in Dingle, they'll have the bacon and cabbage on. But if you go to a restaurant, they might have their own variation of seafood from the harbour here. And it would be like tapas food, but they'd be all small plates, beautifully presented, mussels, oysters, shrimp.
Sounds great.
So yeah, I like to go out for a meal, go to a nice restaurant, and we have Doyle's restaurant in town, and they do wonderful steaks. But again, they also do small plates and Solace restaurant. Solace is tapas, but more of an Irish slant on it. But it's all small plates. So lots of small plates.
I like that.
And lots of wine drinking, Christina. Yeah. Wines in Ireland. When I was with Waterford back in the day, back in the 1980s, Irish people didn't really drink a lot of wine. We drank Guinness, pints of Guinness and pints of ale. And wine, there was maybe one or two brands of wine in the supermarket. But we used to make wine glasses in Waterford Crystal, and we export thousands upon thousands of them to the States every year. And there were Lismore and Alana, all the different suites of crystal. But the wine glasses back in the 70s and 80s were always very small. They were very dainty looking, small wine glasses, and you'd often see them in your mom's pressing, but the glasses are too small. These days, people want to put a half a bottle of wine into a glass. So they
healthy pour.
A nice healthy pour. We make wine glasses. One of my favourite patterns is called Celtic Flame, and it's the very first pattern that I created, Christina. It's modern. It's Celtic.
It's beautiful.
It's got cup and circle rock art engraved by hand into the crystal, and it's not too busy or geometric. So it's got nice flowing lines, and you can see the wine perfect in it.
Yeah.
But the wine glass, more importantly, Christina, they're much larger today in 2026 than what they were years ago.
Let me ask you, Sean.
Yes.
How long would it take you to make that glass? That's a proper wine glass in the States. It's obviously more ornate, has a lot of detail, but a single glass like that, how long does it take to make?
Just to give you an idea, first of all, the first part of the process is the batches made. The batches like silica sand and various ingredients, and it's all mixed together. It goes into the furnace, and then it's heated at a certain temperature. It becomes liquid, and it's blown into the shape of a goblet. And then the stem is attached to it in liquid form, and it's spun around, and it goes into a kiln for a week.
Oh, wow.
And it cools down very, very slow. So all the stress, all the temperature is taken out of it, and the stress is taken out of it. Because when it's first made, it's like a stretched rubber band. Then I get my hands on it, Christine, and I mark up the design by hand on it. I draw out the design on it, and then I hand cut it on the wheel. So the wheel is spinning in front of me, and the wheel is made out of diamond. And I have lots of water flowing down. I then hand cut the piece. And so I guess I do maybe 3 of these an hour. I'm pretty fast on 3, sometimes 4 an hour. I have to do the stem, cut the bowl, and then it's got to be hand polished. So we have to polish the piece on polishing wheels. So if you were to put all the time it takes to make one piece, there could be a couple of hours work going into one glass.
That's a labor of love.
And then we sign and date it, Christina, and each piece then is signed. So if you got, for instance, if someone comes to Dingle Crystal and they go online onto our website, we do have a website, order some wine glasses, you might get 2 or 4 wine goblets, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll be exactly the same.
Right.
They will match, they will be the same in height exactly, but the cuts might be slightly heavier or just marginally. You'd notice it by the naked eye. If you're looking at it, you'll know the difference with handmade crystal. But also, the more important thing about the wine glass, the cut crystal goblet, is that we like to cut the crystal on a high-angled wheel so that when you run your fingers on the wine goblet, you can feel the sharpness in the edge. I always say to a person when they come into the showroom here behind me, and I'm showing them the glass, I say, look, hold that in your hand, feel the edges on it, and see how it feels in the hand, and the same goes for a whiskey glass.
So I guess some of
Christina.
the imperfections, right? If something's not uniform, it's part of the authenticity.
Well, look, sometimes I get an email. Most of the time people understand, and even when we answer an email, they understand that you will get a small little bubble in a piece of crystal. It's not making it out to be a second. It's mouth blown. It's handmade. I always remember many years ago being in New York. The first time I went, and I was in the Waterford Crystal section in, I think it was Macy's, and this lady came back with a big vase that she had purchased, and she bought it to the manager in the Waterford section. And she said to him, "Sir," she said, and I happened to be standing there talking to him. And she said, "Sir, that's it's got a bubble in the glass." And she said, "It's a second." And she said, "I'd like a replacement for it." And he turned around to her and he said, "Madam," he said, "that's the sweat of a man's brow after falling onto molten crystal." Well, she looked at the piece and she said, "I'm keeping this."
Absolutely. I did want to say earlier, I bet you could get really badly hurt cutting some of this crystal when it's coming out so hot.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be very careful. I've got a few cuts on my hands down through the years, but I've always, I have a young man came into us this week for work experience, and he's like 16 years of age, and so I have to teach him and train him, how to handle a piece, and you have to be very careful. We don't want any accidents, and I've been very fortunate, and and so have my craftsmen. We've never had any bad accidents. That's because they're trained very well in how to handle crystal glassware.
When you're designing pieces, do you have specific foods or drinks in mind?
Yeah, we're kind of at this point in stage, unless I'm commissioned to make a specialist piece for a person and we get an email and they say, "Well, look, Sean," for instance, I go to Vegas every December.
You get around, Sean.
I do. I exhibit for the last 8 years at the South Point Hotel and Casino just outside the Strip. But it's the national finals of the rodeo. and 500,000 cowboys descend on Vegas for roping and all those different type of things that go on out there. But we bring out a whole collection of whiskey glasses. So some of the ranchers would come to us and say, Sean, can you design a whiskey glass for me and put our ranch brand on it? And we do that. We've been now doing it nearly 8 years. And so our Crystal is in a lot of ranches around America. Cowboys, they like to have their ranch brand, or they might want horses engraved. I'll just show you a piece. Bear with me a second.
Okay.
That's a whiskey glass done for a ranch, and that's got a horse scene on it, all hand engraved. And here's another one.
Wow, it's stunning, Sean.
Yeah, the amber is the new color that we started to go in. So you were talking about design and coming up with new ideas. Well, what we've gone into in the last 2 years is color. And we're now starting to be, instead of, we used to always done the clear crystal, now we're doing colored pieces. So the crystal is actually blown and made clear, but then it's rolled in a tray of colored amber silica, and then it goes back into the furnace, and it gives that beautiful color on it.
I love it.
So that's some of the new things like that we're doing, but we're always open to do designs for customers. But at the same time, we're very much tied into what we do in the sense of wine glass. We're doing the same shapes with the last 15 years. So if someone comes back after breaking a glass years ago, they can always, in a sense,
they can replace it.
They can replace it, yeah.
Right.
So exactly the same height and size. But what we do have is we create new designs. We create new patterns. All the patterns that we do, Christina, are inspired by the local landscape. And so we have a group of islands off the coast of Dingle called the Blasket Islands, where the last inhabitants emigrated to Springfield, Massachusetts back in the 1920s. So we now do the Blasket collection. So we have the Dingle collection. We have different collections.
Great. Irish culture doesn't separate every day from special. If something is beautiful, it deserves to be used. Up next, we're going to talk toasts and why St. Patrick's Day is about belonging. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome back to the show. We are celebrating St. Patrick's Day tonight with Irish master craftsman Sean Daly of Dingle Crystal. Welcome back, Sean.
Thank you, Christina.
Okay, what do you hope people feel when they inherit a piece of your crystal?
That's a good question. I would like to think that, people used to say to me when I opened up the store here, we're 28 years in business in Dingle Crystal. And
Wow.
as I've explained to you there, I've taken on new craftsmen. So Crystal glassware is still very, very popular today in 2026 than what it was when I was making it in the 70s. And I'm delighted to say that because Adam is carrying it on. But it's an heirloom. So, yes, the people that come into Dingle Crystal today that would buy a pair of wine glasses, they're not just purchasing something that to bring home to use. They're purchasing some of their heritage. I think there's like 10 million Irish Americans in it. And they come to West Kerry and to the Dingle Peninsula. You know, they come here and they want to bring a little piece of Ireland back home. And so when we tell our story, I would like to think that when they do purchase a pair of whiskey glasses or wine glasses from Dingle Crystal, that they're purchasing something that they can pass down to their own children, to their own families, you know. And so I would think it's an heirloom.
Okay. Are younger generations interested in learning crystal cutting?
Well, you know, it's, as I said, we have this week, you know, just because it's midterm for the schools, we've taken on a young 16-year-old young man, and he's with me for a week or two just to learn the craft. And we'll see how it goes. Once he's finished school, young people are still interested in learning the art of cutting crystal. Although personally, I prefer, if I'm taking on someone here to work with me, it takes 5 years to qualify, and I don't want to invest. I don't have the time to invest into people that are not interested or are going to turn around a year or two and say, "Oh, this is not for me."
Right.
So I'm really more interested in some person maybe in their late 20s, early 30s that are after maybe married and they want to live in the community and be a part of the community. Bear in mind, this community here in Dingle, Ireland, is Irish speaking as well as English speaking. So it's called a Gaeltacht, where people still speak fluent Irish as they did 200 years ago. Because it's a peninsula, the language has been saved here, and they're trying to encourage young people to live and stay here and to learn the language.
All right. Tell me about the White House, because I know you wanted to talk about that.
No, well, I was just saying like that, Christina, you know, every year for the last 70 years, the Irish government would go to America, go to Washington, and they would meet the president. I think it started with John F. Kennedy. And they would go to the States and meet the president in the Oval Office. And they would always present him, it's a kind of a traditional thing, with a crystal glassware bowl of shamrock from Ireland. And they would discuss Irish politics and Irish affairs. And you know, we had a history here in Ireland with the Troubles and all that type of stuff. So
That's
they were
right.
these days it's just over for a chat, and they still discuss investment and different business opportunities and stuff like that. So the Irish government came to me there a number of years ago and asked me would I consider making a bowl for the president. And I was delighted to be given the opportunity to do that. I made a beautiful bowl, and the design was called Celtic Flame. Ooh. And it had crystal shamrocks on it as well, cut into the piece, and harps. And we shipped that out to the Irish ambassador's residence in Washington. And the next day, our Prime Minister, or in Ireland, he's called Taoiseach, is the Irish word for Prime Minister. Our Taoiseach went to the White House and met the President, although I think that was not the first time. Yeah, the first time we've done the bowl, COVID was after starting. So he had to actually, he presented the bowl from across the road virtually, showed him the bowl, and then it was handed to the President. Then the next year, then they were back into the White House, into the Oval Office, and we got to make the bowl again. And then on the third year, I got an email, came into my inbox. Adam informed me that Daddy said, there's an email here from the White House. And it was the secretary to the President of the United States. And they asked me, would I like to attend the White House on St. Patrick's Day? And I
That's
took him
so
up
fun.
on the
How can you say no to that, right?
It was the highlight of my career, Christina, as a master craftsman, to be invited by the president. The Irish government can't invite me to the White House, only the president. I was invited to the White House in Washington, and it's the highlight of my career. And it was such an honor. And I made a beautiful bowl in the Beehive collection. The design resembled the Beehive buildings on Slayhead Drive, which is west of Dingletown. And it was presented to the president, and I was sitting 4 paces away from him as it was being presented, and our Prime Minister, our Taoiseach, was up on the podium with the President, and it was a wonderful day. I got to meet lots of people in Washington, and I was handed a beautiful certificate by the President, and you know, came back to Dingle, very happy person. It was fantastic.
I love it. Let's leave it right there, Sean. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. This was an extra special episode for me. As I mentioned, St. Patrick's Day is really big in my family, Irish American family. So I know they're going to get a kick out of this.
Christina, thank you for inviting me onto your show. I want to wish you success with your show.
Thank you.
I also wish you a very happy St. Patrick's Day from the people of Dingle, from Dingle Crystal. And if you're ever in Ireland sometime, come down to us.
I'm going to. Believe me, I'm not going to Ireland and not coming to Dingle.
We will welcome you with open arms. We will look forward to taking you to our special town here and showing you around.
That's that Irish hospitality that I love. Thanks, Sean. Be well.
Slán, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to our ingredient of the week. And this week, it's Irish butter. Rich, golden, and unmistakable. Irish butter is prized for one simple reason, the grass. In Ireland's mild, rain-kissed climate, cows graze on lush pasture for much of the year, producing milk that's richer in butter fat and naturally higher in beta-carotene, which gives Irish butter its unmistakable deep golden color and clean, creamy flavor. Traditional Irish butter is typically cultured or lightly salted, enhancing complexity without overpowering dishes. Historically, butter was so valuable in Ireland that it was often stored in peat bogs for preservation. Some of those ancient bog butters have even been discovered centuries later. Butter wasn't just food, it was currency, sustenance, and a cornerstone of rural Irish life. Today, brands like Kerry Gold have helped introduce the world to Ireland's butter-making tradition, but the heart of it remains the same: pasture-raised cows and time-honored methods from Ireland. Classic dishes that shine with Irish butter. You have brown soda bread served warm with thick slabs of it, and boxty, which are Irish potato pancakes. And then, of course, seafood like lobster, scallops, and Dover sole, finished simply with a little bit of butter. Baking, where Irish butter elevates shortbread, scones, and pastries with exceptional flavor. Simple, pure, and deeply rooted in tradition, Irish butter proves that when the ingredient is this good, less is really more. Thank you for listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates, Sunday nights at 9 p.m. on AM 970 The Answer. Many thanks to Adam and Sean Daly of Dingle Crystal and to Ireland for reminding us that beauty belongs at the table. Crystal, like food, carries memory. It outlives us, and that's the point. St. Patrick's Day isn't about excess. It's about remembrance, resilience, and joy. It's about honoring where you come from and who you share the table with. This St. Patrick's Day, whether you're sharing a meal, raising a glass, or simply pausing to appreciate what's been made with care, remember that craftsmanship is love made visible. Tune in next week as I'm joined by Italian-American enthusiast Tony Scilia, a.k.a. Tony Mangia. He's going to take us on a soprano-style tour, food tour that is, of North Jersey and some old-school spots. I just had dinner with him the other night at the Belmont Tavern, and that was something I've never experienced before, so you're going to get a kick out of this show. But that is the show for tonight. Thanks for listening and have a great night.
The preceding program is sponsored by Shake It Off Live, LLC.
In times like these, we all need a word of encouragement. From pastor and best-selling author Max Lucado comes the Max Lucado Encouraging Word podcast. With over 40 years of ministry and more than 145 million books sold in 50 languages, Max shares the greatest story ever told, the living Savior who brings hope for a lifetime. Through rich biblical insight, heartfelt storytelling, you'll be reminded that God is always near, always for you, and always in you. Listen to the Max Lucado Encouraging Word podcast, where hope meets your day. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.